Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome tonight to this review of the Formula 1 season so far. And it's great to have you guys along with me tonight for this stream. And yeah, it's going to be a good long stream, similar in length probably to, my race previews that I do, obviously for Grand Prix weekends, probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. And what we're going to be getting into tonight is obviously all the teams, all the drivers. We'll also be getting into plenty of stats of the night to illustrate how certain drivers and teams have performed this season over others. Obviously, we'll look at the championship battle in great detail, and really, through stats, look at how Red Bull have such a big lead over Ferrari and how Max Verstappen has such a big lead over Charles Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship. And then obviously we'll get into how Mercedes have struggled this season, and then get into the midfield and how certain drivers compare to others through the midfield. And we will get into, probably midway through the stream, some very important driver market news. Not just from yesterday, which I'm sure you guys have already heard the news, and I did post on my community tab, but there has been, 45 minutes ago, another announcement in regards to a driver driving at a certain team for 2023, and we will get into that in this stream. Not in a super in-depth way. I probably will cover it a bit more in-depth at a later point, but yeah, we will get into it briefly about midway through the stream. Hope you're all doing well, guys, watching the stream after the Hungarian Grand Prix. A pretty good weekend in Budapest, and even though it's a summer break, I'm sure this summer break is going to fly by like it always does for every Formula 1 season. And no matter what time it is in your part of the world or where you're from, hopefully you're all having as good a day as you could possibly be having, given whatever circumstances you are going through. Now, I think the first thing to look at before we get into the teams and the drivers and how they've all done, let's get into the championship standings just to look at, where they are or where it is at, the championship standings for the drivers and constructors going into the second half of the season after what has been a good or maybe even pretty good first half of 2022. So in the driver standings, Max Verstappen leads by 80 points from Charles Leclerc second. Verstappen, I said a few races ago, has the championship wrapped up. At this point, though, I think Max really could win the championship by Singapore or even Japan, which is only, 10, 12 weeks away, which is quite soon from now. And it would be a surprise, given how close, obviously, Red Bull and Ferrari have been on pace in 2022. If Verstappen wrapped it up by the very early part of October. You never know, could get it wrapped up before then if Ferrari continue their antics. And yeah, Charles Leclerc second, just ahead of Sergio Perez in third. George Russell now up to fourth, just ahead of Carlos Sainz in fifth. Lewis Hamilton sixth, and Hamilton looking good for finishing probably top four in the championship if he keeps up this form for the second half of the season. And given how Ferrari are performing, I think Lewis could finish second in the championship this season. Lando Norris then is in P7, with Esteban Ocon 8th, Valtteri Bottas 9th, and Fernando Alonso in 10th. And then for the constructor standings, Red Bull are leading by 102 points from Ferrari. Ferrari. And I said this, I think, a couple months ago, that I thought Red Bull were going to be pretty easily the Constructors' World Champions. And yeah, they are going to be. And it would be Red Bull's first Constructors' title in 9 years. And they haven't won the Drivers' and Constructors' title in the same year since 2013. Again, 9 years ago. Ferrari now looking behind them at Mercedes, who are only 30 points behind. And to be honest, I think Mercedes will overtake Ferrari for second, which would be massively embarrassing for the Italian team. And then you've got Alpine fourth, 4 points clear of McLaren in fifth. Alfa Romeo sixth. What a season they've had so far, even though it has petered out as of late, but they are still looking very good for a top six in the championship in 2022. And then you've got Haas in seventh, AlphaTauri 8th, Aston Martin 9th. Obviously, Aston Martin closed the gap by a point again to the three teams ahead of them. And then Williams are last in the championship. So let's now get into the teams and how they've done so far this season. And we will start with the Red Bull team. And Red Bull in 2022 came into the season obviously with quite a bit of confidence. Max Verstappen, even though the championship was won in dubious circumstances, Verstappen had a fantastic year in 2021. And Red Bull, I think, even though they didn't win the Constructors' Championship in 2021, came out of that year very confident in their ability to win and dominate again, possibly, because they took on Mercedes and ran them so close in 2021. And coming into this season, we did expect it to be Red Bull versus Mercedes, but Mercedes obviously have had their massive struggles, meaning that replacing them in fighting Red Bull have been Ferrari, which has been beautiful for the Red Bull team because they've been able, despite having a car that is just as quick as the Ferrari team, they've been able to, because Red Bull operationally as a team are a much better team than Ferrari are, they've been able to have the championship wrapped up by the halfway point of the 2022 season, which is brilliant for them. When if they were fighting Mercedes this season in a close fight, then I don't think that would necessarily be the case in terms of having the championship wrapped up so early. But the start of the season wasn't great for Red Bull. They were definitely slower compared to Ferrari. The Red Bull car weighed quite a bit more than the Ferrari car, which was a big reason why they were so slow compared to Ferrari, especially at the Australian Grand Prix, and obviously had a couple reliability failures. You can see here Sergio Perez when he spun out on the exit of turn 1 on the beginning of the final lap in Bahrain, the first race of the season. And then obviously Max Verstappen broke down in Australia. So after those first 3 races, it was not looking good for Red Bull. There was even talk from a lot of people that if Ferrari could get another couple wins at, say, race 4 and race 5 of the season, which was, Imola and Miami, that Ferrari could have the championship wrapped up because Leclerc had a massive lead over Verstappen after the first 3 races. But obviously, they turned it around massively, as going into Imola, Verstappen won there with Leclerc making a mistake, and then the wins just rolled off for Red Bull, winning then in Miami, Spain, Monaco, they won with Sergio Perez, and then won in Baku and Canada as well. That was 6 wins in a row for the Red Bull team. That's the longest winning streak they've had since 2013. We're obviously in the final, was it the final 9 races of that season? They won all of them, I think, after the summer break, did Red Bull. It's the longest winning streak they've had since then. Not as good, obviously, as then, but still a pretty great one. And by the time that streak came to an end at the British Grand Prix, they already pretty much had the championship wrapped up. Of course, Ferrari did gift them a lot of points that Red Bull didn't really, in terms of pace, they didn't really deserve it in terms of how quick their car was. It's not like Red Bull were getting all those, getting all those wins because they were so quick or so much quicker than Ferrari is. Because Ferrari, as we'll get onto soon, no matter what position they were in, no matter how great it was, would make it so easy for Red Bull and gift Red Bull victory after victory with reliability failures, poor strategy decisions, and even driver errors as well. And then obviously, at at Silverstone in Austria, Red Bull had a slight dip in form. They were a bit unlucky at Silverstone because I think Max Verstappen would have won that race had it not been for the debris that was caught in the, side pod of his car. Austria, they were beaten fair and square. And then obviously Ferrari have imploded once again in the final 2 races in the last 2 weeks or so before the summer break. And that's why Verstappen won in France and in Hungary 2 days ago, which is why Max Verstappen has an 80-point lead over Charles Leclerc. Let's get into some stats regarding Red Bull in 2022 so far. So Max Verstappen has, in the 13 races so far, 8 race wins, 2 sprint race wins, and 3 pole positions. Just 3 pole positions in 2022. And also, you know, with the 13 races we've had so far this season, Verstappen has won 61% of the races this season, despite taking only 23% of pole positions in 2022. And that, as we'll get onto more so with Ferrari, really does illustrate just how Red Bull have basically won the championship. It's because on race day, 80% of the time, Red Bull are performing better than Ferrari do. And, you know, you do have the odd race here or there where Ferrari do get the better of Red Bull, but Red Bull are much better on race day compared to the Ferrari team. And you can see that by, again, Verstappen having won 61% of races, despite only 23% of pole positions on the Saturday. And quickly going back to Red Bull. So, yeah, Max Verstappen has been... let me just mute my microphone a minute. I just need to clear my throat. There you go. That's better. Max Verstappen so far in 2022 has been... I don't think as good as he was last year. I think last year he was at a higher level, and I think wasn't at a higher level because he was having to perform at a higher level against Lewis Hamilton, who is, you know, better than Charles Leclerc. And obviously, Mercedes are a better team than Ferrari are, so he had to perform basically perfectly for 80% of that season in 2021 to get into the position where he was at the end of the season, being so close to the championship, and then obviously winning it in the final Grand Prix. This year, Verstappen has been very good and at times great, but a lot of the wins he's had this season have been gifted to him. For example, you know, the Spanish Grand Prix, Verstappen obviously made a mistake at turn 4, and then had some trouble getting past the Mercedes of George Russell. If it wasn't for Charles Leclerc's engine failure, Verstappen wouldn't have won that race. Baku, I mean, I think Verstappen would have won there in Baku anyway, even if Leclerc had finished the Grand Prix, but it gifted him what was a very, very, very easy win in Baku. In Canada, obviously, he had a very tough fight winning that race against Carlos Sainz. And Carlos Sainz, obviously, at the very end of that race, pushed him very, very hard. If Charles Leclerc, who was starting at the back of the grid for the Grand Prix that weekend, if he was able to start, you know, where he probably would have started on the front row somewhere, then Max might not have won that race, because Ferrari, I think, had a slight edge on race pace that day and looked to be the better team, but Carlos Sainz just wasn't good enough to beat Max Verstappen in that Grand Prix. And then, you know, when you look at the French Grand Prix and the Hungarian Grand Prix, the last 2 races we've just had in the last 2 weeks, I mean, I think Verstappen would have won in France anyway, and it was driving well, but Leclerc's mistake did benefit him quite a lot. Still, you know, that's Leclerc's fault, and Verstappen, you know, did deserve to win in France, but didn't have to exactly work really hard for it. And then in Hungary, Max 2 days ago in the race was brilliant. There's no doubt about it, but Ferrari's decision to go onto the hard compound tyre gifted Verstappen victory. By the way, if you want to go check out that video about exactly how Ferrari gifted Max Verstappen victory in Hungary 2 days ago, there's a link below to a video in the description from myself that I uploaded yesterday detailing how Max Verstappen was gifted victory by the clowns in Maranello. But, yeah, Verstappen, he's been good this season, but let's not forget that he has been gifted a few results this season also by Ferrari's incompetence and ineptitude in 2022. But he has been very good. Also, Sergio Perez has been very good this season. I know in the last 3 or 4 races he has slowed down quite a bit compared to what he was going like in the first 8 races of the season. But to be honest, there was a lot of people as well talking about this. I remember around Monaco and Baku, obviously after Sergio Perez's win in Monaco. You know, there were a lot of people talking about Sergio Perez could win the championship. Now, obviously, he's fallen off quite a bit since then. And has been beaten quite handsomely by Max Verstappen in the races since, say, Baku, where Verstappen won in a Red Bull 1-2. you've got to remember, nobody coming into this season expected Sergio Perez to be even talked about 7 or 8 races into the season as a title contender. So Sergio Perez has had a very good season so far, and Perez is only 5 points behind Leclerc in second, and I think Sergio Perez has a very good chance of finishing second in the championship. So I think Perez has been definitely, in the last week or so, and even the last month or so, has been unfairly criticised, because I think he's had a great season. He's done mostly the job that Red Bull want him to do. So yeah, I can't really criticise him that heavily. And I think he will. Once we come back from the summer break, I think we'll see some better performances from Perez, especially at Spa and Monza, where I know he goes pretty well. But yeah, Red Bull, absolutely the team, the best team in 2022. And they are heading for a certain Drivers' and Constructors' Championships. The only thing I'll say going forward for the rest of the season that Simon brings up in the chat is it will be interesting to see, with the new FIA technical directive about flexi floors, be interesting to see if Red Bull are really affected by that. We'll see at Spa. If they are massively affected by it, then it could make the rest of the season very exciting. To be honest, though, even if Red Bull dropped off the pace by like half a second compared to what they're like now, I still think they'd win the championship, because I think Max is still too consistent and I think has still too big of a lead over everybody else. But let's move on now to the team that you guys absolutely love me talking about, and that is, of course, the Ferrari team. And, well, what a massively, massively disappointing season they have had so far. I mean, from what we saw in testing and the first 3 races of the season, it really did look as though Ferrari were going to win, or not win the championship, but they were going to, at the very least, run it close with Red Bull to the very end of the season. Now, even after 3 races, and, you know, when Charles Leclerc had that massive lead over Max Verstappen and over Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, I still thought Red Bull would win the championship, and I still thought they'd get right back into it. But I did not think by the Hungarian Grand Prix, race 13 of the season, with still another 9 races to go, that Ferrari would be this far behind that they are in the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships. Again, Charles Leclerc, like I said earlier, 80 points behind in the Drivers' standings, and Ferrari over 100 points behind Red Bull in the Constructors' standings as well. A shocking gap to have between them and Red Bull, when it should be, I mean, maybe Red Bull should be ahead anyway because they are the better performing team and just better team in general, but it should be way closer than it actually is between Ferrari and Red Bull. And yeah, the first 3 races of the season, if we get into that quickly, were very, very good. I don't think Ferrari could have done any more than they did in those first 3 races. Arguably, Carlos Sainz, the man on screen, could have performed a slight bit better at the Australian Grand Prix, where he obviously made a mistake in qualifying and then obviously spun off in the race. Other than that, though, Charles Leclerc was, I think, doing the best he could, and Ferrari were doing pretty much the best they could in those first 3 races, and that's why they were leading so comfortably after the first 3 Grand Prix. And then at Imola, the tide did begin to turn, with Charles Leclerc obviously making that mistake, finishing in 6th at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, and then obviously Red Bull winning again in Miami. The thing is, though, Charles Leclerc still, going into that Spanish Grand Prix, still had like a 24, 25 point lead over Max Verstappen. And going into that Spanish Grand Prix, we knew that Ferrari were going to be quite a bit quicker than Red Bull, and they did prove to be in the race that weekend in Catalonia. And really, the Spanish Grand Prix weekend is what turned the championship around, because Leclerc, who was leading the race by, I think, was it 13 seconds? He was going to win that race by an absolute country mile. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. His engine, of course, failed him, came back to the pits, parked it in the garage, and Max Verstappen was gifted, despite a mistake, quite a poor mistake by him, was gifted quite a comfortable victory despite, what he had to come through after his mistake. So, yeah, just a shocker there for Ferrari. But they did have the chance to redeem themselves at the Monaco Grand Prix. Ferrari obviously locked out the front row. And if you look at history in Monaco, if a team locks out the front row, it is incredibly rare that they don't win the race on the Sunday. Ferrari, though, are that special. That's indeed what they did. They did not get victory in Monaco. They were leading 1 and 2 for quite a few laps in wet conditions, you can see on your screen. And then when it came time to pit for dry tyres, or intermediate tyres, possibly, Ferrari absolutely destroyed Leclerc's race, pitting him for inters when they really shouldn't have, and should have kept him on the science strategy that they did, obviously, for Carlos, by running him a bit longer into the race and going from the full wet tyre to the dry tyre. If they had done that, I think Ferrari would have had at least a race win with Charles Leclerc in Monaco. And that meant that in those two races, in Spain and Monaco, where Ferrari not just had to win, but they really should have won at least one of them, but really should have won both of them, they ended up winning neither. And Leclerc only scored 12 points from those two races in Spain and Monaco. There was, though, the chance for Ferrari and Leclerc to redeem themselves in Baku. Leclerc got an amazing pole position and didn't have a good start to the race. Perez ended up getting into the lead of the Grand Prix and led to the first 10 laps or so of that race. Then as a virtual safety car came out, Leclerc pitted early, or Ferrari pitted him early. And even though I think Red Bull would have come back and beat Leclerc in the end on the fresher tyres, Leclerc would have still finished probably in second, which wasn't that bad of a result, to be honest, because I thought Red Bull had the better race car anyway, compared to Ferrari, no matter what Ferrari really did. So, yeah, it was, it wasn't going to be a terrible result. But then, of course, Charles Leclerc's engine blew on the pit straight on, lap 20. That was about 15 laps or so after Carlos Sainz also had an engine failure. So both Ferraris were out. Red Bull got a 1-2. And then because Leclerc had to take an engine penalty in Canada, and then Verstappen won again in Canada, the championship was pretty much over at the Canadian Grand Prix. But it didn't stop there for Ferrari. They continue to delve even deeper in 2022. So at Silverstone, got first and third in qualifying. Then in the race, after Max Verstappen had to pit and had that bit of AlphaTauri bodywork, I think in his side pod somewhere, did Verstappen. Ferrari really should have got a comfortable 1-2. And they were leading first and second up until the safety car came out with about 15 laps to go. And it looked as though Ferrari were going to get, before that safety car, at worst, a first and a third. But then they made the incredibly galaxy brain decision to keep Charles Leclerc out on hard tyres when everyone else pitted for soft tyres or medium tyres. Again, galaxy brain decision from the Ferrari team. That ended up with Charles Leclerc dropping down to fourth. He did his best to defend, but on those tyres couldn't do enough to get on the podium, was never going to be able to. And Carlos Sainz did win the Grand Prix, so credit to him, but yeah, they made it way harder for themselves at the British Grand Prix. Really should have been a 1-2, a 1-2 for the team at Silverstone, with Charles Leclerc winning that Grand Prix. They would respond in Austria with a very good weekend, a decent sprint race result of second and third for the two Ferrari cars, and then in the race, Ferrari were miles quicker than Red Bull. It was kind of similar to what we saw back at the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne, where they were like half a second quicker than Red Bull on lap time. It was brilliant for the Ferrari team, but still, they made it hard for themselves. As you can see on your screen, Carlos Sainz having a massive engine failure, preventing the team from getting what was going to be a certain 1-2. And then Charles Leclerc had a throttle pedal problem with his car, which almost resulted in him retiring from the Grand Prix. They got the victory, but again, it was, they barely got the victory over the Ferrari or over the Red Bull team, when it should have been an easy 1-2 finish. Certainly if Red Bull had that type of car that weekend, it would have been a 1-2 easily for the Red Bull team. And then, as you saw with a couple pictures ago, yeah, in France, pole position, Charles Leclerc got the Ferrari team, and then was leading just about from Verstappen in the race. Started to pull away at the end of the first stint. Verstappen triggered the undercut, and Ferrari, for some reason, didn't react straight away. I think Verstappen would have won that race because I think Red Bull had better race pace than Ferrari did. But then Charles Leclerc, pushing too hard, ended up spinning and crashing out of the Grand Prix at turn 11. And yeah, just so disappointing from him. A very poor mistake. But, you know, given how far behind in the championship Ferrari were at that point, obviously Leclerc feeling the need to take unnecessary risks, and that's what resulted in the crash, but still a poor mistake from him. And then in Hungary, Red Bull had a shockingly bad qualifying session, as we know from a few days ago. Ferrari, despite not getting pole position, which they really should have got second and third, and by midway through the Grand Prix, they were first and third. Leclerc had like a 5 or 6 second lead over Russell. Verstappen was fourth, and I even said on the stream, I thought Ferrari would get the win because they just had enough pace, and really were going to have too much for everybody else in winning the Grand Prix. But then made another Ferrari Galaxy Brain decision to pit Charles Leclerc for hard compound tyres. Again, make sure to check out the video link below in the description for that, as to why Ferrari gifted Verstappen victory in Hungary 2 days ago, and as to why, obviously, the hard compound tyres were performing so poorly. And then they ended up losing the Grand Prix. And if Leclerc had not gone onto the hard and then gone onto the soft and then gone a few laps longer on the medium and then gone onto the soft like Carlos Sainz did, Charles Leclerc probably would have won the Grand Prix, because obviously he only finished like 16 seconds behind, I think, Verstappen in the end, did Charles Leclerc. And he took on an extra pit stop. So Leclerc would have won in Hungary had it not been for that. But it has been, even for their standards, a comically bad season so far. As you guys know, in 2019 and 2020, I did end-of-season reviews of Ferrari's respective seasons those years and, you know, took the absolute piss out of them. And coming into this season, I expected more hilarity, but I did not think it would be this bad. I mean, I've got enough content already to do an end-of-season review that would go, you know, 30, 45 minutes long, and we've still got 9 races to go. So, yeah, I'm sure you guys are looking forward to my end-of-season review. And confirmation, by the way, I am going to be doing an end-of-season review when it comes to Ferrari, which, even if it goes like an hour and a half, 2 hours, I will still do it and upload that video. But, yeah, what a shit season. They have, I think, the fastest car on the grid, do Ferrari. At least in qualifying, Ferrari have had the best car. And at some of the tracks they've had pole position at really should have converted it into victory, considering how hard it is to overtake. At some of the circuits they have got pole positions, such as Catalonia, Monaco, Paul Ricard, even Baku to a certain extent. It's just, again, it's incredible how, and even Miami, you could argue as well, it's incredible just how they've blown so many great opportunities this season. And Ferrari, if you look at this season so far, they could have won, Ferrari, almost every race this season had they, you know, got it right when they, you know, actually ended up getting it wrong. They could have been in Red Bull's position right now if they actually performed like a top racing team and a top sports team, you know, this season, but they're not a top sports team. I said this, I think it might have been a few years ago, back in 2019, that Ferrari might have a front-running car, but the way they perform trackside, you would think they are like a midfield team, like an Alfa Romeo and a Haas. And that's absolutely the case this season. If Ferrari had a car as quick as Alfa Romeo, Ferrari would probably be 7th or 8th in the championship right now. That's how bad they are. Yeah. By the way, hello to Nib in chat. Great to see you. And hopefully you are basically recovered from COVID as well. But yeah, it's been a shockingly poor season for them. Let's get into some stats, though, with Ferrari that really do illustrate just how bad of a season it has been. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, right here is what the championship standings for the top 6 look like after the Australian Grand Prix. So Charles Leclerc was leading on 71 points. Russell was second on 37. He had a 34-point lead to the next car or driver in the driver's standings after just 3 races. And Max Verstappen, who obviously is leading massively over Leclerc now, at the time was 6th on 25 points and was 46 points behind. 3 races later, Max Verstappen took the lead of the championship. It just shows you how quickly they crumbled. And I could see, by the way, Nib, who says, oh yeah, I forgot to say I'm negative now. Good to see. Yeah, just shows you how quickly they crumbled, Ferrari. That they lost this championship lead over Verstappen in just over a month. Just incredible how bad that is. But what I did today was I looked at the races obviously so far this season, and what I did was I redid the championship standings for both Verstappen and Leclerc, and I counted the points they would have scored, Leclerc and Verstappen, had it not been for bad luck or problems that happened for them that ended up hurting the amount of points they scored that wasn't due to them. So, for example, Verstappen obviously had 2 failures at the start of the season that cost him about 36 points, and then Leclerc's had a multitude of issues. So you can see that right now in the driver's standings, Max Verstappen is leading by 80 points from Charles Leclerc. Let's now get into what it would have been had Verstappen and Leclerc had suffered no bad luck this season for the 2 drivers, and it had been down purely to how well they performed, but given the pace of the certain cars as well. This is what it would look like if Verstappen and Leclerc had both suffered no bad luck this season. Max would be leading, instead of 80 points, it would be 50 points, which does show you that even though a lot of people like to make the claim that, Leclerc has been so unlucky this season, which he has, he definitely would have been a lot closer to Verstappen in the championship had it not been for the engine failures, the penalty he had in Canada, and a couple really poor strategy decisions. No doubt Leclerc has been screwed over this season, but Verstappen has had his bad luck also. Again, 36 points. He lost in Bahrain and Australia combined, and then probably would have won the race at Silverstone had it not been for the debris that got stuck in his car. So I have Max Verstappen leading by 50 points from Charles Leclerc in second, had it not been for any bad luck for both drivers. But the thing is, let's say if you're just looking at this from a Ferrari point of view and their failure to capitalise on the fact that Verstappen had 2 failures in the first 3 races this season, if you take away the points that Verstappen actually did lose due to the Silverstone debris, damage, whatever you want to call it, and then the 2 failures at the start of the season, if you take those points away from Max, that'd put Max down to 200 and... how many points? I mean, if you take 36 points away, that's what, 263 for Verstappen. And then if you take away a further, what would have been 19 points that he lost at Silverstone, that's what, 244 points. So if Ferrari had actually capitalised on Max's bad luck at times this season, Ferrari would have Charles Leclerc leading the Drivers' Championship by 5 points. Just shows you how bad they have been since that Australian Grand Prix. And Charles Leclerc, through mostly no fault of his own, has only had 2 podiums since the Australian Grand Prix. And there's been, 10 races since then? It's a shocking record, honestly, that Leclerc has had. So, yeah, no doubt they've cost him an absolute shit ton of points in 2022. And let's get into here some stats, comparing Max and Leclerc. And you can see with these stats, it really does illustrate just, where it was lost for Ferrari. So on race day, in terms of race wins, Max has 8, Leclerc has 3. When it comes to pole positions, though, it's 7-3 to Leclerc. In the races, though, if you compare, who finished ahead of who in the races, it is 9-4 to Max. Again, Red Bull just able to improve quite a bit on what they do in qualifying, but Ferrari so many times just cannot capitalize on their great qualifying pace. As you can see, it's the opposite in terms of who was ahead. Leclerc versus Max in qualifying, 9-4 for Leclerc when it was 9-4 for Max in the races. If Ferrari had converted about 30% more of their qualifying results into actual race results, then we'd actually have probably a championship fight on our hands, but that just is not the case. And let's get into Charles Leclerc a bit more. So yeah, taken 3 race wins and 7 pole positions in 2022. And despite taking 53% of pole positions in 2022, has won just 23% of the races this season. That is really poor. You cannot win a championship if in, 13, 14 races so far in a season, you've only taken 20 to 25% of victories. You cannot win a championship that way. You need to be winning, really, at least 35% of the races, in the first 13, 14 races of a season. You've got to be winning at least 35, if not 40% of those first 13, 14 races. And yeah, you could blame Leclerc for France, but when it comes to a lot of the other wins that were lost, it was definitely due to the Ferrari team. And let's quickly compare Charles Leclerc against Carlos Sainz. And yeah, let's get into it. So in the races, it is 6-6 between Leclerc and Sainz. Obviously, that adds up only to 12, and obviously there's only been 13 races. The reason I don't account for all 13 is because obviously in Baku, they both retired from the race. So that's why I didn't count that Grand Prix, because they didn't beat each other at all. They both retired, obviously. In qualifying, Leclerc has absolutely smashed Carlos Sainz 10-3 in qualifying. Obviously, Carlos Sainz has 1 race win, his first ever win in Formula 1 at Silverstone. Leclerc has 3. And then in terms of podiums this season, Carlos Sainz actually has 1 more podium than Charles Leclerc, 6-5 against Leclerc. And if you look at since the Spanish Grand Prix, where it really started to turn around the championship with Leclerc's engine failure, even though Leclerc has been mostly with these results cost by his own team, Carlos Sainz has massively outscored Leclerc since the Spanish Grand Prix. Obviously, he finished, I think Sainz, was it 4th in Spain, 2nd in Monaco, and then 2nd in Canada, and then 1 at Silverstone, retired in Austria, then 5th in France, 4th in Hungary. And in all those races since the Spanish Grand Prix, the only races where Leclerc has beaten Sainz is the Austrian Grand Prix. So it shows you again, Sainz has improved his performance, there's no doubt about that, but Leclerc has been royally screwed over in 2022. And yeah, it's such a shame, because I was really looking forward to a very good and tight championship fight again like we had last season, but Ferrari are completely hopeless as a Formula 1 team. The only or 2 more things really to talk about is Carlos Sainz. I am actually going to do a video on Carlos Sainz, recorded video, which should come out probably this time next week, so make sure to stick around on the channel for that. But what was I going to say? Yeah, Carlos Sainz, I won't get into it too much, but definitely has not been that good this season. Has had a 2 or 3 races here or there where he's performed well, but most of this season, I think Carlos has not been quite where he should have been, and quite on the pace of what we've seen so far. Not so far, but what we've seen previously from him in much slower cars. So yeah, I think Carlos could have performed a lot better this season, and if he did, then he probably would be 2nd in the championship, capitalizing obviously massively on Leclerc's issues. And then the last thing to say is, same thing as Red Bull. It'll be interesting to see how Ferrari get on after the summer break with the new FIA technical directive with flexing floors. If it affects them more than Red Bull, then Ferrari are absolutely fucked. They're probably, if it affects them more than Red Bull, it affects Red Bull, then Ferrari might not win a race for the rest of the season. And obviously their last win was in Austria. They've won 4 races this season when really they should have won about 6 or 7 out of the 13 so far in 2022. But we'll see how it is for Red Bull and Ferrari, especially compared to this team, Mercedes, after the summer break. But let's start with their season so far. So obviously, the biggest shock of 2022 is the poor performance of Mercedes. They have improved a lot, obviously, towards the summer break, and they are not too far away from where they were at worst in 2021. Another 3-4 tenths of a second, I reckon, gain on Red Bull and Ferrari, and I reckon they'll be right back where they want to be, and they'll probably, if they keep that up for next season as well, be back being a title contender in 2023 as well. But let's get into their season so far. So we've already discussed in a previous stream about how Mercedes have, produced their worst car in a decade. I did a stream on that. I think it was on the 1st of June, so it's probably, 2 months ago? So if you want to go check that out as to why Mercedes was so bad this season, or have been so bad this season, then make sure to go check that out on the channel. If you go back a couple months, you should be able to find it. And the thumbnail says worst car in a decade on the actual thumbnail, so just helping you there if you want to try and find that. But we know, obviously, the porpoising problems they've had, lack of straight line speed at times has really hurt them, and definitely hurt them at the start of the season. And the first 4 or 5 races of 2022 were very, very tough. In Australia, and thankfully that picture comes up now of them in Australia, probably was the best race they had in that first 5 races, where they were at times not that much slower, if not a tad quicker, towards the end of the tyre stints they had than Red Bull. But a lot of the time they were not just slower than Red Bull and Ferrari, they were a second slower than Red Bull and Ferrari. The Spanish Grand Prix, we saw the first big upgrade from the Mercedes team, and they definitely improved a bit on what we saw in the early part of the season. And Russell was, for a time, leading that Grand Prix, but then obviously fell away in the end. The Mercedes still not quick enough to win Grand Prix, but at least he got a podium. He can see he had a great battle with Max Verstappen for the lead, and showed that he can absolutely fight at the front of the field. And then, after that, in Monaco and Baku, they dropped right back off the pace and were right back to where they were in those first 5 races, being a second a lap off the pace. In Baku especially, with the porpoising, their car was absolutely terrible. And they were lucky really to finish in 3rd and 4th because of the 2 Ferraris blowing up. But then in Canada, we saw an improvement. Their pace improved quite a bit, and they got a decent qualifying there and ended up finishing 3rd and 4th yet again, just like they did in Baku. And we're only about half a second per lap off the pace of Max Verstappen, who ended up winning that Grand Prix. And then at Silverstone, we saw a further upgrade from them. And Mercedes were, in the dry, they were right on pace with Ferrari and Red Bull. The only problem was qualifying. They, obviously in the wet, performed so poorly. And I don't believe the Mercedes car really in wet conditions still is that great of a car. That really did cost them. If it was dry for qualifying, I think Lewis Hamilton could have actually ended up winning the British Grand Prix. Still ended up 3rd. Still, even in the race, had a chance of winning the Grand Prix despite starting from P6. But if it was a dry qualifying, I think Mercedes could have ended up winning the British Grand Prix. Then in Austria, we saw some very good qualifying pace from them, but both drivers ended up crashing out and not capitalising on the good pace they had. In the sprint race and the race itself, they dropped off quite a bit in terms of pace, but still ended up getting 3rd and 4th, which is still a good result for them. Then in France, they lacked a bit of qualifying pace, but then in the race were pretty quick and were right on pace with Perez in the second Red Bull, and ended up getting second and third. Obviously, Leclerc's mistake did help quite a bit. And then in Hungary, we saw them surprisingly, really surprisingly, getting pole position with George Russell. A fantastic lap from Russell. And to be honest, I mean, like I said, with the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, I think they could have won that had things gone a bit more their way in terms of the weather on Saturday, on qualifying day. But 2 days ago in Hungary, I think they could have won that race had things gone more their way. If Lewis Hamilton, who qualified 7th, had not had his DRS issue, I think Lewis Hamilton would have won the Hungarian Grand Prix 2 days ago, because without the DRS issue, he probably qualifies 3rd or 4th. And if you look at his pace through that Grand Prix, it was really, really good from Hamilton. So, yeah, I think Hamilton would have got the victory had it not been for that from that, DRS issue. But very encouraging for Mercedes, how much they've improved. They've gone from being 1 second a lap off the pace of Red Bull and Ferrari, and are now in race trim right on the pace of those two teams, and at most probably a couple tenths of a second off the pace of the two top teams. They've improved so much. And also, how they performed in qualifying in Hungary will be a big benefit and big motivator for them going forward, just to see, how quick they were in Hungary, how unexpectedly quick they were when in practice they were looking so slow. So, yeah, great to see how much Mercedes have improved. Obviously, the way they started the season and the car they had at the start of the season was very, very poor. And if the flexing flaws do affect the Ferrari and Red Bull teams quite a bit after Spa, Mercedes could end up getting more than just one race win, could end up getting 2 or 3 before the end of the season. And I do think, guys, that Mercedes will get a race win before the end of the season, whether it be at Spa or Monza or Singapore, maybe Suzuka. Suzuka will be a great track for them because of how fast it is. They will get a win this season. I am very, very confident of that. But one talking point with Mercedes has been the competition, but also the performance of the two drivers against one another. So let's get into some stats regarding Lewis Hamilton versus George Russell. So in the races, Russell just about edges it 7-6. It was, though, after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, 7-1 in Russell's favour. So Hamilton, since the Canadian Grand Prix, has been, I think, right back to his best. And I think Lewis Hamilton is, at the moment, the best driver on the grid. And has been since the Canadian Grand Prix. He's been performing at such a high level since that Grand Prix. In qualifying, Hamilton has just about edged it out 7-6, but it is very close. Good to see Russell so close to Hamilton in qualifying. And when it comes to podiums, Lewis Hamilton just about taking it over Russell as well. And yeah, Lewis Hamilton, since Canada, has had 5 podiums in a row. Before then, obviously, only had 1 in Bahrain, when Russell had a podium in Melbourne, Spain, and Baku. So when we got to Canada, before the race, it was 3-1 to Russell in his favour. So great return to form for Lewis Hamilton. Wasn't performing at his best in the first 8 races, but I think his lack of performance at times was a bit overstated by some people. And yeah, I think these two are performing at a very high level, and it's great to see them both pushing each other so hard this season, because it will benefit the team in winning races this season, which I think, like I said, they will do. Just to say quickly, guys, that yeah, make sure to keep your comments coming in the chat, because I will come to you guys very, very soon. And what we're going to do is we're going to get on to McLaren and Alpine and that fight, and then I'll come to you guys in the chat. So make sure to keep your comments coming. And if you are new to the channel as well, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Obviously, we'll be uploading plenty of content through the summer break. And obviously, we do race watch-alongs, qualifying watch-alongs for every Grand Prix in 2022. So yeah, it would be great to have you as a subscriber to our channel here. And as well, further from watching, don't forget to smash that like button. And also, if I could speak English, don't forget to share this video and channel everywhere you can. And check out the videos in the description once I'm obviously done with this particular stream. Now we'll get into McLaren, and the season hasn't been terrible for them as we get into the midfield now. It's not been a terrible season for them. It could have been a lot worse. The start of the season was really, really poor from the McLaren team, but compared to where they were hoping to be in 2022, and given, how much progression they had made as a team through, 2019 up until 2021, really, McLaren should have been maybe not fighting for the championship. I think that's a bit too extreme, but really should be where Mercedes are at the moment, kind of, in that fight for podiums to a certain extent at some races during the season on pace. I mean, if we look at Mercedes have not had the pace really to get a podium that many times this season. A lot of their podiums have come through luck, to be honest, because of reliability problems for other cars or other teams, or other cars being took out of the race with accidents or whatever. But McLaren, given the progress they've made in the last couple years, they really should have been right there, especially with Mercedes in the first, say, 10 races of 2022. And even though, again, it's not been a terrible season for them, it should have been quite a bit better. And they should not be 5th in the Constructors' Championship. They should be in at least 4th, but way, way, way closer to the 3 teams ahead of them. It's been a poor season, like I said, so far for McLaren, given how good of a team I think they are compared to what they used to be like 5 years ago, and obviously given their driver lineup as well. And the start of the season, they had a lot of poor pace with this car. Obviously, the lack of running they had in practice due to reliability issues when it came to the brakes did not help at all. But they had no pace at all, and they were, I think, had multiple points of downforce they were lacking compared to the other midfield teams. They would gain pretty much all of that back. Well, not all of it back, but a lot of it back by the Australian Grand Prix, where obviously they finished in 5th and 6th in that Grand Prix, and it was a great return to form. Then got a podium at Imola, did McLaren, and after those 2 races, as you can see here, Norris getting the podium, after those 2 races, I expected McLaren to be right there with Mercedes for at least the next few races on the calendar, but then just dropped off completely. Compared to the Mercedes team, which is massively disappointing. Obviously, up until really the French Grand Prix, where they brought a new upgrade, a new side pod design, a lot like the Red Bull side pod, McLaren had really bad straight line speed. Good to see, though, they have improved on that quite a bit, because it was costing them a lot in the first 10 races of the season, and is a big reason why they are now behind Alpine in the championship. And then their upgrade has worked. Their car is a lot quicker than it was before. Their race pace, though, I have to say, compared to Alpine, is not that great, and it will be a bit of a problem for them, I guess you could say, going forward for the rest of the season, compared to Alpine, who tend to have very good pace on a Sunday. And if Alpine can make sure to get good qualifying results, then McLaren are in trouble in regards to that. But simply this season, McLaren have not produced a good enough car. If this upgraded McLaren that they brought to the Hungarian, or to the French Grand Prix, that they've had since then, if they had that car pretty much at the start of the season, or after, or say they brought that upgrade to like the 5th race of the season, McLaren would be pretty clear of Alpine right now, but they brought it too late in the season. And I think it will help them. It won't mean they'll fall off dramatically compared to Alpine and be comfortably beaten by the Alpine team. It's still going to be a close fight, but it's come too late because I think Alpine have got, with the tracks coming up on the calendar, I think Alpine will be the better team compared to McLaren. And really, this upgrade should have been coming at, race 5 or race 6 of the season at the Spanish Grand Prix, where obviously not a lot of the teams bring upgrades. But let's get into some stats regarding the two drivers, Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo. So, in the races, Norris is 9-4. Pretty comfortable when it comes to that. In qualifying, Norris has absolutely hammered Ricciardo in 2022. Not a surprise there. It was the same in 2021. Norris is 4-0 in, and it says T6. That means top 6 finishes. That's what T6 means there. So, yeah, Norris has 4 top 6 finishes. And Ricciardo does have 1 that I forgot to put into these stats. So sorry about that. But, yeah, Norris still pretty comfortable ahead of Ricciardo there. And then when it comes to points finishes, that's what PF means. Norris 10-4 over Ricciardo when it comes to that. So, yeah, Ricciardo, I think his points finishes were, what was it? Melbourne, and then Austria, France, and Baku. I think those are the 4 races this season where Ricciardo's been in the points. And then Norris has had 10 in the 13 races so far this season. Now, Daniel Ricciardo, yes, he could be doing better. I don't actually think Ricciardo's doing that bad at all. I think he's actually performing better than he did last season and is closer to Lando Norris this season than he has been last season. And I will also do a video on Daniel Ricciardo, probably coming out in a couple of weeks' time. So again, don't want to get too much into Ricciardo because I don't want to spoil anything in terms of what I have to say. But Ricciardo, maybe you could argue to a certain extent, has been a problem for McLaren this season in regards to where they are in the Constructors' Championship. But most of the reason why McLaren are where they are is not due to Daniel Ricciardo. It's because the car they have produced this season is simply not good enough. So let's not lose sight of reality when it comes to that. Again, Ricciardo probably should be doing better, but I definitely think the McLaren car just hasn't been this season good enough for not just Ricciardo, but also Lando Norris. But now let's get into the Alpine team. This will be the final team we get into before I come to you guys in the chat, so keep your comments coming. And yeah, what a season it's been for Alpine. This season, I expected them to finish probably at best where they finished last season in 5th. I did not think they would be competing for 4th in the championship. I thought the top 4 would be, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, those 4 teams, pretty much in that order. Yeah, very surprising to see Alpine not just competitive this season, as competitive as they have been, but as consistently competitive. They've been consistently running in the top 10 with both cars for quite a few races now, coming up, to this Hungarian Grand Prix we just had a couple days ago. So, yeah, it's been a great season for Alpine so far. To be honest, I don't think, compared to obviously where they were in 2021, don't think they really could have done any better than they have done. So, yeah, great season for Alpine. The first 4-5 races of the season, we definitely saw the potential for Alpine to have a very fast car. Fernando Alonso has been very unlucky this season, as we know. Alonso could have arguably got a podium at the Australian Grand Prix had he not had his what was it, a gearbox failure in qualifying that caused him to crash. Could have got a podium there that would have helped Alpine quite a bit compared to where McLaren are, or where they are compared to McLaren in the championship. And also, I think Miami, Alonso was running in the points, but then had a penalty, so they lost a few points there as well. And also, Saudi Arabia, Alonso probably would have scored a few points there had it not been for a problem with his PU. So Alpine, again, they had the potential to get some consistently great results in the start of the season, but were just lacking a bit of reliability. But really, if you look at Alpine's results since the Spanish Grand Prix, Alpine have been flawless, really. They've had a double points finish at every Grand Prix since the Spanish one, except for the Monaco and British Grand Prix. Every other Grand Prix since Spain, they've had a double points finish, and that's exactly what they have needed to get into the position they are currently in. So credit to them for that. And I think a reason behind their success is not just the two drivers performing very well, and we'll get into the two drivers in a moment. And yeah, both drivers have been very good this season. But I think the best thing about it, and this has been helped by the Alpine's upgrades, and they brought a pretty good one to the, I think, Spanish Grand Prix that really upped their pace quite a bit, especially at high aero tracks. Their car seems to be competitive at pretty much any track on the calendar, whether it be a high downforce track, a high speed track like a, with long straights, like we saw like in Baku or Canada, or even a medium downforce track, if you know what I mean, kind of like Paul Ricard, which I'd say is medium downforce because of the middle sector there that is very, very fast. They have a fast car no matter what circuit, and I think that's why they will finish Alpine 4th in the championship, because McLaren, they've got a much faster car now, but I still think McLaren, they're going to do their best performances with this new upgrade even at medium to high downforce tracks. When we come to real power tracks, I think Alpine will be quite clearly ahead of McLaren, because I still don't think McLaren's have quite enough speed still in a straight line, despite improving on that with their upgrade. So, yeah, I think that's why Alpine are going to finish 4th in the championship. A great season so far. And, well, so far in the summer break, they have caused a lot of news in the, first 2 days of the summer break so far. We'll get into that in a second, but let's get into the McLaren versus Alpine fight so far. So this is how they compare the two teams when it comes to all of these things. So Alpine 9-4 over McLaren in the races. How I've done that stat is I've compared who had the best race result, comparing those two teams for every Grand Prix so far. And if you compare them both, Alpine have had a better race result than McLaren in 9 of the 13 races so far. And also, Alpine have had much better race pace compared to McLaren so far this season, which has helped Alpine being where they are in the championship. In qualifying, though, McLaren have had a much better time of it compared to Alpine. But as I said, Alpine have had a much better race pace. And then, when it comes to top 6 finishes, they are dead level, 5-5, the McLaren and Alpine teams. But then when it comes to points finishes, this is for each individual car, by the way. The McLaren have had 14 for Norris and Ricciardo, and then 19 for Alpine for Ocon and Alonso. So really, why Alpine are ahead is, again, better race pace. 2 drivers also who are very good on race day, which really does help, not just in terms of pace, but skill. And thirdly, the Alpine car is a better car at all kinds of circuits rather than being track specific like the McLaren car. And let's get into some stats regarding Alonso versus Ocon. So Alonso has been unlucky this season to a certain extent. I think we all agree on that. But it is 8-5 for Ocon in the races. Alonso, though, leads 8-5 over Ocon in qualifying. When it comes to top 6 finishes, Ocon just about leads 3-2. And then when it comes to points finishes, Ocon just about leads from Alonso by 10-9. Now, because Alonso had a failure in Saudi, was really unlucky in Australia, and obviously Canada, where he qualified so high, he ended up having an MG UK problem. That's why he ended up finishing, I think, in 9th place when Ocon finished in 6th. Alonso has been better this season despite these stats. It has been, though, pretty close between the two drivers. And another reason I would say that they are 4th in the championship is not just the good race pace and the good car for all tracks. It's because these two are pretty much on the same pace with each other. Ocon at times, yes, has been a bit slower than Fernando, but they've always been kind of in the same area of the field through, especially the races in 2022. That has helped Alpine massively get into the position they find themselves in this season. But yeah, credit to Alpine. What a season they've had so far. And to be honest, given McLaren, obviously they're not going to improve enough to become what they should have been this season, which is a team that is maybe bridging the gap between midfield and front-running team, kind of like Mercedes have done at times this season. To be honest, I hope Alpine finish in fourth because I think they deserve it. I think they've worked very hard on this car, and they've got it right. And I think both drivers are doing very well, and I think they deserve fourth over McLaren based off what I've seen so far. Now, obviously, we'll see in the final 9 races of the season what McLaren do compared to Alpine, but what do you call it? Yeah, I think Alpine, do deserve fourth in the championship. But that is the top 5 teams so far this season, guys. Let me know in the chat what you thought I had to say about all of those teams and drivers, and I'll get into your comments in a moment. But I just want to quickly check Twitter to make sure that there's not been any more breaking news, because there's been a lot of breaking news catching me by surprise as of late. Oh God, this is very interesting. I've got to show this. Right. Well, let's actually get into what's happened so far. This is, oh God, this is really getting interesting. You guys are going to love this. Right. So, Fernando Alonso, it was announced yesterday morning at literally like 9 o'clock in the morning that Alonso, out of nowhere, will be driving for Aston Martin in 2023. Now, there was a slight rumour when it came to this, I think in June or maybe May of this year, but nobody was really talking about this at all. And even Otmar Safnauer said he talked to Fernando on Sunday night in Hungary and got the clear impression that Fernando intended to continue with the Alpine team for 2023. But it was obviously decided that, from Fernando's point of view, that he was going to be going to Aston Martin. Now, for Aston Martin, it's a great move. It's a great move for them because they replace Sebastian Vettel with someone who I think is actually better than Vettel and definitely has been in the last 2 seasons. So it's a great move for Aston Martin. But what do you call it? But for Fernando Alonso, I got to admit I don't understand why he has made this decision. I really do not understand why he has done this, because Alpine are going to be better than Aston Martin probably for the next 2 to 3 years. So with him having such little time left, I think he's basically just taking a gamble that Aston Martin will get it together and be a right, front-running team, or not front-running team, a front-running team at the midfield pack, and maybe start to get a bit close to those top 3 teams in Formula 1, but I just don't see that happening at all. And I think Alpine will be the better performing team in the next 2 or 3 years than Aston Martin. Aston Martin do have, what do you call it? Aston Martin do have a lot of Mercedes and Red Bull engineers that they signed over the last year or so coming to them for next year. Or I think they have finally started their jobs, but obviously they won't have an effect on the Aston Martin car until next year. So maybe this gamble will pay off, but it's a bold move from Fernando Alonso. It really, really is. And then in the day or so after, it was speculated heavily as to who is going to be Fernando's replacement. There was talk about, obviously, Oscar Piastri, the man on your screen, maybe even Daniel Ricciardo or someone else. But then, 45 minutes before I started streaming, so about 2 hours ago, Alpine, let me just get it up. Alpine, here you go. Alpine announced at 5:15 or 5:11 p.m. UK time, so again about 2 hours ago, that their driver lineup for 2023 was confirmed to be Esteban Ocon and Oscar Piastri, and said, after 4 years as part of the Renault and Alpine family, reserve driver Oscar Piastri is promoted to a race seat alongside Esteban Ocon, starting from 2023. And I thought, well, that makes sense, and yeah, great decision there from Alpine. But if I just scroll up, you'll see this tweet from Oscar 15 minutes ago, who says, I understand that without my agreement, Alpine F1 have put out a press release late this afternoon that I am driving for them next year. This is wrong and I have not signed a contract with Alpine for 2023. And then ends it with a bombshell. I will not be driving for Alpine next year. So, yeah. Who fucking knows what's going to happen? And you see a Matt Gallagher here, like, oh my god. Efron, like, yeah, like, what on earth is happening here? This is a good tweet. Let me show you this. Custody of Piastri ladder match between Zach Brown and Otmar Safnauer. But, yeah, how about that? This is a very similar situation to what happened in IndyCar, where Alex Palou, I think it was, announced he was going to be signing for McLaren Racing, obviously have their own team in IndyCar. But then, what was it, Chip Ganassi Racing, the team he's racing for this year, announced before that he was actually signed on for another year. And now Chip Ganassi is actually suing Alex Palou and taking him to court, I believe. Who knows if it'll happen here? But it appears, and it was heavily rumoured through the afternoon, that Oscar actually has a signed agreement, possibly with either McLaren or Williams. Most likely McLaren, I would say, going into next year. So, yeah, who knows what's going to happen here with Piastri and where he ends up. But he will definitely be on the grid in 2023. Who he will be driving for is anybody's guess. Now, he says he won't be driving for Alpine next year. If Alpine decide to go to court, then we'll see how that goes. I remember back in the day, Jenson Button tried to leave BAR, I think it was 2004, he tried to leave BAR for Williams for 2005, and then BAR, I think, went to the Court of Arbitration for Sport and ended up getting it rejected, and ended up keeping Button eventually until we won the championship with them as Brawn in 2009. So you never know what could happen here. Maybe Alpine can legally actually get Oscar to drive their car next year. But yeah, this is absolutely wild. So let me know also, guys, in the chat, what you think of that whole situation, and who do you think Oscar Piastri will be driving for? If he is correct that he won't be driving next year for Alpine, who is he driving for? Is it McLaren or is it Williams? I think it'll be McLaren, because I think he, and his agent, I think, is Mark Webber. I think he will be going to the McLaren team for 2023. But yeah, let's come to you guys in the chat to see what you guys have to say. And I'll go to the very start of the chat. And also, I'll go back onto some slideshow pictures to keep you guys entertained. Hello to everyone in chat. Perosa says, I love how relentless Chazza is when Ferrari clowns a race. Cheers for that. Fahim says, Chazza should run Ferrari instead of the clowns. If I did, it would be more in a Gunter Steiner type way. Not a... what do you call it? Not a exact same way as Gunter Steiner, but yeah, it would be similar in my, not brutality necessarily, but my straightforwardness. I'm a very straightforward, blunt person, and yeah, if you asked me if you weren't performing well enough, I would give it to you straight, to be honest. Josiah says, let's all laugh at those silly Italian clowns. Butterfly Blue Short says, hey guys, Chazza doesn't sleep. I haven't had a ton of sleep over the last few days, but I have had a decent amount. And yeah, I've been very busy. I've had, on Thursday, last Thursday, obviously, did a stream previewing the Hungarian Grand Prix, and since then, I've not stopped. And I've had content on the channel every day since Thursday, including today. And also, just to let you guys know that, yeah, my next video or piece of content after tonight will be either on Friday or Saturday, which will be my Lando Norris video. And yeah, be either Friday or Saturday. Don't know for sure yet, you know, when that'll be, again, either Friday or Saturday, and I'm not sure what time the video will be uploaded. I mean, if it's uploaded on Saturday, it'll probably be uploaded at like midday on Saturday, nice and early, so you guys can watch it and, you know, all that. But if it's uploaded on Friday, it'll probably be at like 6 p.m. UK time, like I normally do. But yeah, there'll be a Lando Norris video Friday or Saturday later this week, and then the next video after that will be a Carlos Sainz video, which should come out on Tuesday or Wednesday next week. And then when it comes to streaming, what is it? There might be another stream or two in the summer break. It does depend on my availability, and also if there isn't something actually to talk about. If this Piastri thing drags on, then yeah, that could be interesting to talk about. But if I do more streams through the summer break, then I will let you guys know in the on the community tab on my homepage. I'll let you guys know the morning of the stream actually happening, whether I actually decide to do one. Simon says, new rules to outlaw flexing floors come in at the end of this month. It'll be interesting to see which teams will lose performance. Sparky Pete says, awesome Ferrari takes. Only thing I would add is that it seems Ferrari wants to place third this year for the extra development time. Apart from the engines blowing up, the strategy is shit. I don't think they're doing this on purpose. I know people have had that conspiracy theory go through their head, but this is a clear example of, you know, when you have people in positions in teams where they're clearly out of their depth. That's what happens. It makes them look so bad that you think they're doing it on purpose, but they're actually not. That's just how bad they are. Nib, who was in the chat earlier, made sure to say Hamilton has more podiums than Leclerc this season. Well, if you'd said that at the start of the season, that by race 13 that'd be the case, I don't think anyone would have agreed, because yeah, Ferrari were about second a lap quicker than Mercedes at the start of the season. But yeah, just terrible. I mean, Leclerc's had what, 5 podiums this season, or 4? Yeah, Leclerc's had 5 podiums this season in 13 races. That's terrible. That's not even title contending type stats. That's absolutely terrible. Andy Page says, very possible that Ferrari finished third in the championship. However, Latifi could have a good run, lol. Prank says, if you can accept that being Italian is Ferrari's biggest problem, this explains AlphaTauri's problems. Just saying, the problem is not being Italian, it's focusing only on hiring only Italian, you know, mechanics, engineers, designers. Again, it would be a problem if you did that with only British engineers and designers. I mean, I think Britain has the best core of engineers and technical people in Formula 1, but you can't just hire from the same base of people. You've got to just go out there and try and find the best people possible. Sparky Pete says, being a Mercedes fan, I want to see wins this year still, but getting third in the championship may be not too bad. Extra time to develop for next year. That's true. To be honest, though, if they did finish second this year, it would give them a real good bit of confidence for next year that, you know, that they, you know, with the improvements they've made and, you know, still coming back to finish second in the championship when it looked unlikely, it would still give them that confidence that they can still hang it despite, you know, hanging with the top teams despite having such a bad car. A few people saying, I think Mercedes will take second for Ferrari. I agree. I think Mercedes will finish in second in the championship. It's inevitable, really, because Ferrari, they're not going to stop with what, you know, they've been doing this season. Rooksfoot says, scary things that the team that manufactured the most powerful legal engine for the most of the last era have concentrated on reliability as we enter the new one. Yeah, Mercedes have been so reliable this season. Definitely the most reliable team, reliable power unit on the grid by a mile. Cucumber says, I thought fast tracks don't suit them because of the high drag aero concept. No, that's not correct. They did have a higher drag concept at the start of the season, but their car has changed quite a bit since then. So they cut off quite a bit of drag in Miami, I remember, with a lower drag front and rear wing. And their straight line speed's been much better since then. But in high-speed corners, because of the upgrades I think they brought at the Spanish Grand Prix as well, in the high-speed corners, Mercedes are just as good, if not better, than Red Bull and Ferrari are. Which is why I say, at the Japanese Grand Prix, especially with how Lewis Hamilton has performed there in the past, I think Hamilton could win that Grand Prix. Especially if Mercedes can upgrade their car again, which I think they are going to at Spa. And Cucumber says high-speed corners still require low drag. No, I mean, Red Bull are quite strong at them. Yeah, high-speed corners, kind of, yeah. You do require a bit lower drag than you would for, medium or slow-speed corners like you get at, say, Monaco. But, yeah, like I said, the data this season has proved, since their upgrades in May, that in the high-speed corners, they are now, yeah, very, very quick. Sainz has been decent in 2022 at fighting with Ferrari strategists and taking a win, lol. 6 podiums ain't too bad in an inconsistent team. They say Regara, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but yeah, I think he could have done better in a few races this year. Great to see Vinster in chat. De Regara also says, honestly, Ricciardo was actually okay in 2021. He got a win which Norris couldn't, and other than Monaco and Mexico, he didn't really do too bad. Yeah, I thought in 2021 he didn't do terribly, but yeah. Also, as I'm looking at Twitter right now, and Twitter is just full of Piastri memes. What'd you call it? If Piastri does go to McLaren, where does Ricciardo go? I'm guessing to Alpine. That's the only... if Alpine can't get Piastri in their car, that's the only thing they can do, is rehire Ricciardo. But if Ricciardo doesn't go to Alpine, then all he has is Williams. So there's a chance this could be Ricciardo's final year in Formula 1. Rook says Renault having a powerful engine is good for selling some of the new teams looking to join F1. They need to be supplying more teams than just themselves to get more DAT. Well, the Andretti team that is trying to get on the grid for 2024, maybe even 2026, we'll have to see. Apparently, they've said that they've got an engine deal with Renault if they get onto the grid, but yeah. We'll see. I really hope Andretti get onto the grid. I mean, if they don't get on the grid in 2024, at least in 2026, they can get onto the grid. Irvin Sessendorf says, I was never a Ferrari fan, but this year they are so bad it's not even funny. Leclerc and Sainz deserves much better than this very incompetent team. Mariska says, Red Bull leading the constructors by 97 points, not 103. Yeah, what was it? Let me go back to, yeah, this is incorrect. Sorry about that. But they are basically leading by 100 points, but I will make sure to correct that at a future point. Sparky Pete says, with such a big lead, I think Red Bull start to put a lot more development into next year's car than they did last year. That should offset less development time they will get after first in constructors. Yeah. Red Bull apparently have another upgrade for after the summer break. But to be honest, if you're Red Bull, unless the flexi floor technical directive really hurts them, there's no point really bringing it. They may as well just, save it and maybe do some more work on it to make it even better and obviously improve the car in loads of other areas a lot more for 2023. So then they can fend themselves off from possibly Mercedes improving massively. Josiah says McLaren could be in a lot of trouble with Alpine and Chip Ganassi. Sparky Pete says he's going to McLaren. Damn, I feel bad for Ricardo. Vinster says silly season is starting off proper. It is. By the way, hello to Miss Marquise in chat. Good to see you here. Who says 4 a.m. in Australia. Finally made it. And well, good news for you. Well, is it good news? Alpine, like I said, they announced Oscar Piastri will be on the grid for next year. With them, but now he's come out and said he will not be driving for Alpine next year. So it looks as though Piastri's going to be on the grid. We just don't know where. Probably McLaren, I'd guess, but yeah, we'll see. Sparky Pete says Piastri to Williams, then to Mercedes when Lewis retires. Fingers crossed. I'd be surprised by that. I'd be surprised if that happened, but it'd be good for Oscar if that happened. Yeah. But I think, have we got through the bulk of the comments there? I think we have. So I think we'll crack on with the rest of the teams. And again, with this Piastri situation, because I know obviously it's big news at the minute, I will probably do a stream on the whole situation, whether it be next week or the week after. But the reason I'm not going to do it immediately is because I want to kind of wait and see what happens. Because, I mean, there will be a few developments more in the next few days to this story. So let's see what happens in the next week or so. And then, yeah, I'll probably cover it in a stream. But it all just happened too quickly for me because I wasn't expecting all this to happen, to be honest. Anyway, let's get on to the rest of the teams, and we'll get on to Alfa Romeo, who have had a good season so far, and they've been very unlucky this season as well, Alfa Romeo. The two reasons they've been unlucky is because at the start of the season, the weight limit was a lot higher, was a lot lower than it actually was raised to help out a lot of the teams that were severely overweight, when Alfa Romeo had made their car perfectly underweight for what the original weight target was. So, yeah, very unlucky there, because if the FIA stood firm with the weight limit being what they initially had it as, Alfa Romeo could have ended up, as one of the quickest teams on the grid at the start of the season, and they were already like the 4th or 5th best team in the first 7 races of the season for Alfa Romeo. So, yeah, it's such a shame, what happened there with Alfa Romeo. Still, though, the first 7 to 10 races of the season were very, very good. They were at one point 5th in the championship, Alfa Romeo, but just couldn't hang on to it. The Alfa Romeo car just isn't as good as the Alpine, and the driver lineup nowhere near as good as what Alpine have. And they've settled in comfortably to sick them the championship. The second reason they're a bit unlucky this season is they have had so many reliability problems this season. Valtteri Bottas must have had about 5 engine problems in 6 separate weekends this season or something like that. I mean, obviously he retired in Hungary, had a problem at Silverstone. What was it? Saudi Arabia, he had an engine problem. Did he have one in France as well? Or some sort of issue? I can't remember. So yeah, he's had so many problems. And obviously had an engine penalty in Austria. So if it had not been for such poor reliability from the Ferrari PU, Alfa Romeo wouldn't be too far behind the two teams, McLaren and Alpine, ahead of them. But at the minute, they sit in a comfortable 6th in the championship, and I think they will finish there. Haas, I know, behind them are going to try their best to get after them, but it doesn't seem as though Haas's upgrade that they brought at the Hungarian Grand Prix has actually helped them that much. But Yeah, if Alfa Romeo finish in sixth, that'll be one of the good stories of 2022, because this team was dormant for a very, very long time. So it would be great if we had Alfa Romeo finishing in such a high position for once. But let's crack into now the Haas F1 team, and obviously in 2021 they were easily the worst team on the grid, and they were deliberately trying to be that so they could get the most development time for 2022. And they start the season off with a very fast car. Kevin Magnussen qualified 6th in Bahrain and finished in 5th, and had 3 points finishes in the first 4 races. And after those first 4 races, I thought Haas were going to be at minimum 6th in the championship, but then after the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, dropped off massively. Had plenty of opportunities to get some good points in Miami, in Spain also, where they had both cars in the top 10. Canada, they locked out the 3rd row in qualifying, but still ended up not getting a point. And yeah, just wasn't really able, Haas, to capitalise on their very good qualifying pace at times. And obviously them not upgrading the car for 2 months or 3 months really did not help Haas in chasing after the teams ahead of them in the championship. They would, though, have a very good British Grand Prix and Austrian Grand Prix, which put them from, I think, 9th in the championship right back up to 7th, which is good for them. And to be honest, I mean, it would be good for them if they finished in 6th in the championship, but if they finished in 7th, that would be a pretty good step forward for them. Because remember, in 2019, they finished, I think, 9th in the championship. And then 2020, it was 9th, I think. And then 2021 last. So it would be their best season still since 2018, where they finished in 5th, in 2018. So, yeah, Haas are having, in terms of results, a good season, but they definitely could have done better. Both drivers, like I said, they've had plenty of opportunities this season to get good points finishes, but have failed to capitalise on them and take the opportunities when they've come to the 2 drivers. I think the most disappointing thing with Haas is their new upgrade that they brought to the Hungarian Grand Prix actually did not improve their car really at all. They had decent race pace at times in the first 25-30 laps, but it was nothing more than you would have seen before with the Haas F1 team. So, and as well, there didn't seem to be that big of a difference between Kevin Magnussen's upgraded car and Mick Schumacher's non-upgraded car, which really isn't good for the Haas team. But we'll see how they do in the second half of the season. They should finish probably 7th or 8th in the championship, to be honest, in 2022. But let's compare the 2 drivers. And it's very interesting to compare these 2 because Mick Schumacher, you would think, looking at the championship, that he's been, much poorer compared to Kevin Magnussen. But if you look in the races there, he's 8-4 over Magnussen in the races. Now, one of those races that I've not counted was one where both Haas's retired. I can't remember which one that was. It might have been the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where obviously Mick didn't do that race. It might have been that which I deducted from the overall, stat there. But in the races, Mick is outperforming Magnussen. But the reason Magnussen is able to lead this team and be ahead of Mick in the championship the way he is because of qualifying. Magnussen 11-2 over Schumacher in qualifying, and Magnussen will, as the pawn bot is here just in time, Magnussen will finish ahead of Schumacher when it comes to who had the better qualifying record in 2022. If Mick could, increase his the amount of times he's beating Magnussen in qualifying by about 20 to 30%, Mick Schumacher would probably get another 2-3 points finishes than he already has had this season. So it's really qualifying that Mick needs to work on. And especially the only qualifying sessions that Schumacher has outqualified Magnussen at is the ones where the Haas car has not been competitive at all, which I think was Australia and Miami. I think in the race, Miami, in Miami, they were competitive, but in qualifying, they were 15th and 16th, I believe, in Miami. So when the car's competitive, properly competitive, Magnussen is beating Mick pretty much every time, and that has got to improve from Mick Schumacher. In terms of top 6 finishes, they are 1-1 when it comes to that, and when it comes to points finishes, Magnussen leads 5-2. Now, I won't get into Mick that much because I also have a video planned on him during the summer break, but as you can see here, massive crash he had in Saudi Arabia. The first half of the season has not been great. We've seen improvements, and that's good to see. And by the way, that graphic I showed that Mick was 8-4 over Magnussen in the races, that's actually increased the gap between Magnussen and Schumacher, especially in the last 4 or 5 races. So Mick is improving quite a bit, especially on race day, but in qualifying, nowhere near the pace, and still is not consistently on the pace like he should be. So there still needs to be some improvement from Mick, but he's getting better, and that's all I ask for. And if he, keeps up his improvements, then I think he will probably end up getting a couple more points finishes before the season is over. Obviously, the next Grand Prix on the calendar is Spa. I really hope he would be competitive there, and Haas should be actually pretty competitive at Spa-Francorchamps circuit. But let's move on to AlphaTauri, and they have been a massive disappointment this season. Obviously, last season they finished 6th in the championship. They're now down to 8th. Last season, they were pretty much the 5th quickest team on average, I think, in 2021. But this season, they have been terrible. This car, in terms of downforce, has nothing, really, in terms of grip. It doesn't have too bad mechanical grip, but especially the aerodynamic grip on the rear end is very, very poor, which is why AlphaTauri this season have been so bad. And it's also been why Pierre Gasly has not performed that well this season, because he doesn't have the confidence in this AlphaTauri car that he had previously. And that's why he has been so poor compared to what we saw last year, where he was still one of the best drivers on the grid, performance-wise last year in that AlphaTauri. So yeah, AlphaTauri, very disappointing, and I think they will finish probably at best in 8th. Wouldn't be surprised though if they finish in 9th, but next year we do need to see a bit more pace from them. This year's pretty much over for them, even though their upgrade from the French Grand Prix apparently worked. It doesn't seem to have worked that well, because they, in Hungary especially, were very, very slow. But let's now get into some stats regarding the 2 AlphaTauri drivers, because it is interesting to look at this between Gasly and Tsunoda. So in the races so far this season, Gasly is 8-5 over Tsunoda. That's a lot closer than it was in 2021 in the first half of that season. And then it's 8-5 for Gasly over Yuki in qualifying. Gasly has 1 top 6 finish when Tsunoda has none. And then when it comes to points finishes, they are level on 3, Gasly and Tsunoda. Tsunoda has had an underrated season so far. If this AlphaTauri car was performing a bit more like it was last year, in terms of how quick it was compared to the rest of the midfield, Tsunoda would probably be very close, if not in the top 10 of the championship. He's had a good season so far, but just at the wrong time, kind of, because, yeah, this car, very, very slow compared to what it was like in 2021, and obviously AlphaTauri this season, when they have had plenty of opportunities to get some good points finishes, have ended up bottling it on race day. But yeah, AlphaTauri, disappointing, but I don't think they're going to improve on this in the second half of the season. We really need to look to next season if there's going to be any improvement from them. And the final 2 teams we'll go into is Aston Martin. Yeah, what a shit season for them. The car they produced this season is so far off where they should have been. With even the personnel they had for 2022 before they hired these Mercedes and Red Bull engineers, or ex-Mercedes and Red Bull engineers, should have been good enough. really to produce a good car for this year. But I mean, I saw on the first day of testing that they would have a bad car this year. The car was understeering like a shopping trolley in the slow corners. And we saw, even though Vettel missed the first 2 races and then struggled to get up to grips in the third race of the season, where he, finally came to the track after his COVID infection, Aston Martin were shit slow. They did improve towards May and the early part of June, but Aston Martin just didn't really crack on and move on up the grid after their improved results, where they finished, I think, with Vettel 8th in Imola, and then I think Vettel finished, 10th at Monaco, and then 6th in Baku. Here it is on screen, where he finished in P6. That was definitely his drive of the season, Sebastian. And yeah, they did get points finishes in Canada, Silverstone, and France and Hungary. Their race pace is not a problem. They've always had very good race pace, this team, whether they be Racing Point, Aston Martin, Force India back in the day. They're always very quick on race day. But in qualifying, this team is, quite frankly, hopeless. They've had a car out in Q1 at almost every Grand Prix this season. So that's been the problem for them. But compared to where they should be, Aston Martin have been absolutely terrible this season. Maybe they can make an improvement in the rest of the season. But I honestly don't think that is... I don't think that's going to happen. Really, we need to look to next season, when obviously Fernando Alonso comes on board, to see, what happens in regards to any improvements with the Aston Martin team. Next season, they really need to improve, especially in qualifying. If they don't, then they're just going to be touring around at the back of the midfield, really, for the rest, or for the next few years, which is really sad to say, because they should be really up there with Alpine and McLaren, given the personnel, especially, that Aston Martin have. But that's the way they are in 2022. And finally, we'll go on to Williams. Not really a surprise that Williams are last in the championship. Obviously, losing George Russell was a massive blow for them, which was always going to happen eventually. And then Alex Albon in the Williams has performed very well this season. Obviously had a points finish in Melbourne, which I actually think was the best drive of the season so far from any driver. That result in Melbourne, where he was, running at one point up in, I think, 7th place in the Williams, even though he hadn't pitted yet. And then finished 9th in Miami, as you can see on the screen here. And yeah, had a great couple races then. Had other very good races in Canada. He finished in 12th, I think. And also in Austria, was running in a points-paying position with about 10 laps to go. Similar to Russell in 2021 in the Williams car as well. So Williams have had decent opportunities this season. And Alex Albon in the Williams has been very good. But yeah, too slow compared to the rest of the midfield at the start of the season. And even though they've improved their car a lot, they're still not really close enough to the midfield to be able to climb themselves up the championship for the rest of the season. So Williams will finish in last place, but let's hope that they can bring a step forward for next year. But to be honest, if you were to ask me where Williams are going to be between now and the next set of regulations in 2026, I would say that Williams would be last pretty much every season until 2026. They need a miracle to get out of this situation. But let's go back up to here. And I think, guys, as Vinster says, I think Daniel Ricciardo is leaving F1. He wants to race for wins, not best of the rest. That's true, but he's not really good enough for that anymore. Well, he is good enough on his day, but he's not performing well enough to be in a top team anymore, unfortunately. But I think, guys, I will bring this stream to an end. I've been live for almost 2 hours, and yeah, pretty much reviewed the teams and drivers so far this season. Been great to do this, and yeah, thank you guys for watching. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And if for everyone watching live right now, again, if you haven't already, smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And Don't forget to check out my video yesterday about how Ferrari blew the Hungarian Grand Prix and gifted, what do you call it? And gifted Max Verstappen victory in Budapest. Make sure to check that out down below in the description, or maybe Rook's posting it in the chat right now. I don't know. But again, there will be content coming up on the channel on Friday or Saturday. So in 3 or 4 days from now, I will be uploading a Lando Norris video. And then on Tuesday or Wednesday next week, there will be a Carlos Sainz video. And then after that, I've got then a Ricciardo video, Schumacher video, Gasly video, then a Mercedes video. Those are the remaining recorded videos for the summer break. And I will probably do another stream during the summer break, maybe covering this Oscar Piastri Alpine McLaren situation. We will see, though, how it develops in the next few days or week or so before I possibly do a stream on that. But yeah, that's what's coming up on the channel, guys. Would be great to see you tuning in for that content. And obviously the Belgian Grand Prix weekend begins in about 3.5 weeks' time. So not that far away, to be honest. I know it might seem like that, but it's really not that far away. I mean, on the calendar, sometimes we have a 2-week break in between races. So it's only just an extra week or an extra week and a half compared to what it would be normally. So yeah, we will be at the Belgian Grand Prix soon enough in the Formula 1 calendar. But guys, thanks for coming along to this stream tonight. And you also make sure to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. And don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. But guys, until my Lando Norris video and my next stream, which might be next week, might be even at the Belgian Grand Prix in 3.5 weeks' time, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.